Before I start this video, I just want to claim that everything in this video is my opinion, and while I'm going off of a lot of experience with Sumlot, playing it over the past year as I revisit the format in the modern era, I also realize that not everyone's going to have the same experience as me, and this is my opinion. Nothing is said meant to be degrading. It is just stating my opinion based on my experiences as a player of Sumlot, someone who's tried a lot of different decks, and I kind of go into the video on why that is important to try different decks. So thanks for tuning in. Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new video. I don't usually do discussion videos like this. Last week I did the, I upload this on time, I did the Celebrations 2 video. So kind of starting a new genre of videos, kind of getting away from the tier lists for now. And there's not going to be a video necessarily every Tuesday. Today I want to kind of review some points in this stream VOD from Tricky Jim. Now, I do have a lot of respect for Tricky Jim. I've enjoyed their content for years. I've been watching ever since. They were part of Darium, so like all the way back in like 2016, 2017, I think, was when that was. And essentially in this live stream, they're playing a retro format, which is Sun and Moon do Team Up. This was a 2019 format, and this is a really, weirdly beloved format by some people. There's a very staunch supporting crowd. For anyone who doesn't know, this is the first format with tag teams, and that had dire consequences. One of the things that I want to do in this video is I want to kind of dispel a lot of the misinformation that's spread in this video that he uploaded about Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder. Andrew Mahone had a very negative experience with Lost Thunder, as well as Will Mantho, from playing either boring decks or bad decks and categorizing the format as that without really seeing the meta for what it is. Because one of the things that's known about Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder is that, Zoroark Blacephalon is what a lot of people talk about. And that's true to an extent. However, it's also because a lot of people just didn't explore anything. They didn't try anything, when there's actually a wealth of good decks. I'm going to bring up PTCG Legends as I go through this to kind of show examples and why Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder, which is considered one of the best modern formats of all time by its players, compared to Sun and Moon to Team Up, a Stage 2 attacking, lacking format, as these big basics take over, and these basics like Zapdos and Buzzwole that can just hit on the first turn of the game and take out evolving Pokemon. This format is the start of the end. It's not this this is a good format. The playing might have been fine, but it's not similar to Lost Thunder like he says in this VOD, and it's not at all a good format in my eyes because of the lacking of evolution and setup-based decks that really just went out the window with the introduction of tag teams. Pika-Ram, yes, is counterable, but it also, on turn 1 is doing 150, and turn 2 is doing 2 prize cards on my field. So as Stage 2 decks almost entirely disappeared, besides Vileplume Stall and a few other examples. We saw some Meganium decks still seeing play, but really not the same way they were in Sumlot. I'm going to be going over this video, just pausing and talking over points.
This was a fun time, and if you had a favorite deck from that format, the thing is that it might have only lasted 3 months. Mm-hmm. So you're like, cool, I got to play my favorite deck for 3 months. Yeah.
He's entirely correct here. The decks in the Sun and Moon to Team Up format really only last for 3 months. In a way, there's 2 big breaks. This is the way I'll explain it. There's the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder to Team Up break, where all of the Stage 2s are gone, and a lot of the iconic tanking decks are gone. A lot of the best decks from the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format just turn on their head because I can't deal with losing 3 prizes by turn 2. And then you have the break from Team Up to Unbroken Bonds, where the format became losing 3 prizes on turn 1. And that's probably the main difference, if I had to say anything, was that we went from format where you have to cope with losing Sumlot. You're losing maybe 2 prizes in on turn 3, unless you get a ridiculous starting as a deck. Then you go to Team Up, where you're losing 3 prizes by turn 2, turn 3 if you're playing against Pika-Ram, and then, or if you're playing a tag team and it gets knocked out. And then we go to Unbroken Bonds, where a lot of times turn 1, turn 2, the 3 prizes are going out. So really it's it goes, you really just count down the turns, but there's almost as big of a break in the meta destruction that happened from Sumlot to Team Up as there is Team Up to Unbroken Bonds.
It's similar to the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format. I know a lot of people are big fans of that format. I think it's a...
So here he says it's very similar to the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format, and it ultimately couldn't be farther from the truth. We do see a few of these best Sun and Moon archetypes survive. Blacephalon obviously would very much love a 3-prize format. If anything, it almost gets better than it was in the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format. You know, we see some other decks pop up still, like the Malamar Ultra Necrozma, which was really not that great of a deck, if you ask me, in the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format. Not the best Malamar variant at the very least. It's still like a good tier 2 deck, but it's just a bad Malamar variant in comparison to the other ones. Become better because one-shotting becomes more important. On the table here, he's got, I think, Buzzrock, which gets a big boost because something with Lycanroc. It's probably Buzzwole. Obviously, hitting Fighting Weakness becomes doubly as important because you have Zoroark and Pikachu and Zekrom. So Buzzrock actually goes from like a tier 3 deck and it gets better. You get some of these decks that improve based on the fact that they can one-hit KO. But that's the thing, is that the decks that one-hit KO are getting better, and the stage 2 decks, you know, these are like fast and aggressive decks. Like Blacephalon is like easy attacking, like turn 2. Malamar easy attacking turn 2. Lycanroc easy attacking turn 2. With the Buzzrock deck, like these are very fast decks. You know, Zoroark is always fast, of course. That's literally what Zoroark does. If we go to the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format, ignore some of the rogues that we have here, and like obviously here's a Buzzwole Lycanroc list just for you know, points to show it off. Here's a rogue deck I played. You think this deck is doing like anything in the Sun and Moon team-up format? Absolutely not. Moving on from that though. You know, these decks that can't one-shot really fall off. Obviously, Decidueye Rogue here is not a deck that can ever take one-hit KOs on like a big Pokemon. This is a very slow and methodical deck where the damage placement matters. Unless you're using Ice Path or Sublimation for a lot of effect, you're not getting a one-hit KO. You know, obviously my Kofkrigus deck is very much like a 3-hit KO deck. Even on like resistant hits on Zoroark GX, it's not, you know, ever taking down a tag team, especially with Ice-Roll around. Gardevoir GX, you know, able to one-hit KO most things in this format, suddenly can't really one-hit KO these tag teams anymore, so it falls out. It then becomes a 2-hit KO deck, and it's not as good. Here's the Malamar list. Malamar lists that aren't going to be one-hit KOing, so like the spread list, where's a good spread list? We don't have a good spread list here. We'll just use this one as an example. Shining Arceus maybe isn't the best card in the world, but Malamar spread is like the best Malamar variant for my money in the Sun and Moon 2 Lost Thunder format. And that's because of its ability to set up fast damage, but it's not setting up fast damage in OHKOing. It's a spread deck. It's going to take time to do it. Spread decks are just not going to thrive in a format with 240 HP basics, 270 HP basics, that can heal off the damage with things like Acerola. Obviously, Ultra Necrozma, a one-hit KO deck's going to do a bit better. So, like, saying it's like the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format, obviously PTCG Legends doesn't have team-up decks, so I can't really show you, like, lists, but the decks that were popular at the time were mostly basic. You had Pikarom, you had Zapdos decks. Zapdos was everywhere. Zapdos outperforms everything from Lost Thunder. It's a basic that does 70 on turn 1. There is nothing that does that in the Lost Thunder format to that extent, that of that amount of damage. Doesn't even need a DCE. It is far outstripping everything in the Lost Thunder format. It can even do more if it wants to with Electro Power. Really, these formats could not be farther apart when we're talking about a one-set difference here. If anything, Sun and Moon Team Up is a lot more similar to Sun and Moon Unbroken Bonds, because most of the big archetypes that weren't like, you know, tank decks like Celosaur did just fine. So, going back to the video.
It's okay, honestly. But I kind of like the tag. Like, Will and I were talking about it before the stream. Why wouldn't you want to play with Jirachi?
Yeah, exactly. Like, who wants to play some lot when the next format gives you Jirachi?
Ultimately, why don't we want to play Jirachi? Jirachi is a very hyper-aggressive card. It very much, I think it creates a interesting deck building in the spot of that you can use it to, you know, play a lot of more tech trainers. But we already saw that in the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format. We saw Ninetales. Ninetales being one of the best tech cards ever. Items are very teched out. If we go take a look at, I believe it was Angus Johnson's Zoroark Decitales here. I guess it's not on this website, so we'll just use this one right here. This deck plays a lot of tech item cards. You'll see this in every Ninetales deck because it can do that. The difference is that Ninetales is an evolution, so Ninetales is usually seen play in evolution decks. Yes, there's the Buzzwole deck that plays it, but that's also for beast rings and such. You can play a lot more tech items in these decks because Ninetales gets them. And while Jirachi does the same thing, Jirachi encourages basics, and it also works perfectly with Zapdos, who would absolutely dominate the format, like completely destroying a lot of these slower setup decks who just can't have like 6 prizes taken before they even get to do what they want.
Here, I was a big fan. I played Blacephalon GX. In Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder, I remember not clicking with any decks. I didn't like Zora.
Yeah, none of them were fun.
None of them were fun. Didn't like the format. I couldn't play Decidueye anymore because that was trash.
This is possibly what made me want to do this video. He said he played, obviously, Blacephalon during the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format, and he's going to go on to complain about that, and I'll get to that in a minute. But Decidueye GX, oh boy, being bad. I would like to inform you that Zoro Decitales is widely considered to be the best non-stall deck of the Sun and Moon format. Zoro Decitales, just use the list Angus Johnson put some rainbows in there, put Yveltal GX in there. That is the best non-stall deck in the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format, and Decidueye is a huge part of that. I know Decidueye, like, there was actually a Decidueye player. I think I showed this list up here earlier. This was actually a deck that you could also play. You could still play Decidueye like it was played in 2017, and it still works because Stage 2s got good again with Ninetales. Stage 2s became great with Ninetales. So you could play any Stage 2 that's remotely good. But Zoro Decitales is the most versatile, the best deck in the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format. I'm, like, actually stunned that he said it's, like, trash, because Zoro Decitales is literally, like, the best deck besides Regigigas Stall.
So, like, I was like, whatever, dude, I'll play Blacephalon and blow things up.
Yeah.
And that was, like, fine. I didn't like the deck a lot, but Blacephalon certainly got the job done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because if we're thinking about Blacephalon is really not that interesting of a deck.
No.
So this actually, I think, paints his picture of the format and why he didn't like it. Ultimately, he played a deck that is the most simple and easy to play deck in the format that does not require any level of, counterplay. The deck's routes are extremely solved, and it's almost based on luck. And he kind of paints the whole format under the guise of the easiest deck. Doing that would be doing a disservice to all formats. If we go to, let's just say, go to 2010 Worlds, we'll take a visit to my favorite format. If I had only played, let's go down to it. If I had only played Donphan in 2010 Worlds, I'm just going to go to this list because I like this list better. It's still not my list, I play Nidoqueen in mine. But if I had only played Donphan in 2010 Worlds, I would think the format is garbage, because Donphan is one of the most boring cards ever printed. It does what it reads on the card, there is no counterplay, nothing interesting. Your opponent's doing all the interesting things. If you play Donphan against SP, your opponent's going to be dancing a happy little dance, throwing poisons at you, moving your energy around the board to stall out your attacks, trying to keep you from using your earthquakes. Donphan, though, Donphan does nothing interesting. This card is boring as sin. This deck is terrible. But thankfully, I did not start 2010 with Donphan. It was like my 8th deck into the format, and I realized, this is the outlier deck in this format. This is the dumb deck in this format. This is like the deck that's not fun to play. Meanwhile, we look up here, Dalderchamp's pretty cool, I will mention that, but like, Kurskar, my favorite deck of all time, is in this format. If we go down right below Donphan, Flyterra, another one of the coolest decks of all time, just sitting beneath it. What I'm saying here is that letting your, picture be colored by what you are well aware of is the easiest to play, least fun deck of the format, and like making that, your opinion of the format is a bit like shallow in a way, because you really aren't representing the format for the complex games it can bring out.
There wasn't a lot of hand disruption in this format. You know?
No, there was just Marshadow.
And literally none. It was just Let Loose Marshadow was the only hand disruption in the whole format.
And Judge.
And Judge, but like almost nobody played that.
You played.
Judge actually, they're going to mention that he played it in a second, so like there is some credit there. Judge is actually coming into the format more recently. If we go back to 2018 somewhat, I don't know if this list specifically has it in the Zoro Desi Tales list. Go up a little. So this list does have Judge. Judge is actually a really big factor in Zoro arc, Zoro Desi Tales. And if you've been watching lists evolve over time for this format, lists have been starting to include Judge a lot more. And it was just kind of that this format was, like I said, not really played out, not really discovered. Judge is starting to creep into a lot of lists. If you've seen the lists of people like James G, even some of my lists that I'm working Judge into, people are realizing that Judge belongs in every Zoro arc deck, essentially, because disrupting your opponent's hand is always good, and Judge with Pal Pad gives you that option. This list doesn't have Pal Pad because it's bad. Don't worry about it. But Judge is a very good card, and you're seeing it slowly creep into lists, but at the time, it wasn't played just because the lists weren't trying anything new. We did see Judge in like some control decks, obviously, Limit Hand. We saw some stall decks like right here, right? Like stall decks are going to play Judge because it's hand limitation, but like this is a list right here. Solgaleo Ninetales, shout out to Ivanov, great deck builder. This is a list that came out after the format. This is an article that Ivanov wrote, I believe, on Channel Fireball, talking about the Solgaleo GX list that he had thought about after the format had done and tested, and it's actually a really good list. And you can see these updated lists start to favor Judge because Judge is so good. People didn't play Judge because they weren't willing to take the risk of the hand disruption, but it is so worth it. And the decks that play this, the decks that innovate for this format, will play Judge because it's a good card. Marshadow was obviously more popular, so in basic decks, you know, Rayquaza Vikavolt, this is a list I have built. Change one or two cards. You're not going to play Judge in this if you have Marshadow. And, you know, some decks are just going to play Marshadow because Marshadow is really good. Here's another Judge, Simeon, actually. Odd choice there, but it is there. You know, so not all decks are going to play it. Some decks are going to play Marshadow. And Marshadow is one of the worst things about this format. I do plan on making the Problems of Somewhat video, like I made the Problems of 2011 NVI format video, to talk about, you know, the problems of this format that I love so much. While there's much less so in the case of Somewhat than like 2011 NVI, there is still things, and Marshadow is one of the biggest ones. You'll hear me talk about that, how it's that's definitely the worst part of the format. Though that continues on even into Team Up. The only thing that changes about Team Up is that all the decks are basic, so like who cares if you get hand disrupted? You're a basic, you're gonna draw out of it, and all the decks have basic Jirachi supports, they're gonna draw out of it too because of that. So it's like a little bit less of a game ender than it can be in this format sometimes. Hand disruption just wasn't like experimented with as much, and these lists from the time, well, not bad, hey, it's my list, don't always experiment with hand disruption. And it's why I can get away with playing things like Greninja Meganium, because non-updated lists can't judge my Greninja Meganium deck down to cards in deck. By the way, give this deck a try. It's one of my favorite decks of all time. I put the list together based on an idea from Shintaro Ito. I did a deck profile on it even. It's one of the most fun decks of all time. Legitimately, it is so sick. And I crafted this list myself from, you know, I used the idea that Shintaro Ito had, but this is like probably at least like 10 cards different from Ito's list, so I highly recommend, probably like 10 cards on that mark. I highly recommend, you know, building this deck and checking it out.
None of the other decks were cool. I tried to play the Buzzwole Ninetales deck. The deck was horrible.
Buzzwole Ninetales.
This deck, in actuality, he said it's a bad deck. It is. It's a tier 3 deck, and the reason that's a tier 3 deck is because it doesn't have that Ooga Booga Max Elixir 3 energy into play, do 290 damage on the first turn kind of plays that it was doing throughout the rest of its life because of Max Elixir. The deck has to play a little bit more item tech with Ninetales, but there's no Max Elixir anymore, so it's not just getting turn 1 knockouts on everything in the format, no strong energy. It made the deck a lot more skill-based and skill-intensive, but it also lowered the power level of the deck because suddenly the deck's not playing an unfair game. It's forced to play on even terms unless you just Marshadow your opponent into a dead hand. Again, I don't love Marshadow. The deck is in actuality a tier 3 deck. One of the biggest like ironies of the Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder format is that Buzzrock Ninetale, despite, you know, being the fighting deck you'd think it'd beat, you know, every Zoro arc in sight, it actually loses to Zoro Desi Tales because of Ninetales, because Ninetales will In the Zoro Destiny Tales deck, you'll attach a fairy energy to it, attach a counter gain to pay for that second cost, and if they take out a Zoro on turn 1, you're just return KOing them for 2 prizes. So like if you play the bad decks, you're going to have a bad time in the format ultimately. You need to play good decks or creative decks, and creative decks is really where Sunlot shines. It's one of the most diverse and open formats in the history of the game due to its lack of ability lock, lack of like severe item lock, things like that. Really allows you to play with things, and sometimes lack of ability lock can hurt formats. I do think Garbodor was a good thing throughout the 2018 2017 season. It was good to have Garbodor around. Absolutely, though. Also, it held back a lot of the Sun and Moon's coolest stars from ever seeing play, and we kind of got to see them in this 3-month block, and they're not broken. They just get the time to actually play the game instead of just not having abilities. And
I think so. Like for me, Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder, it always confuses me that people are obsessed with that format because like
It's horrible.
to me, it was like it's a pretty bad format.
Like Install is like one of the best decks. Like,
Yeah.
It's just not a good format.
But then Team Up made the format, in my opinion, a lot better.
I do want to pause here. Will Mantho made a great point. Stall is like arguably the best deck in the format. We do see from a modern perspective, Regigigas Stall, this is Crap Manly's list, we'll go to Sander Wojcik. This is like the classic Stall list right here. And this is basically like the best deck in the format in a way, but it actually wasn't played a lot at the time. I find it weird that they're complaining about it. This deck was not widely played at the time. It is, though, like argued to be the best deck in the format just because it has really ranges to answer everything, though also Marshadow and Judge are not being played enough to counter this deck, and Marshadow and Judge hard counter this deck a lot. So if you play a lot of Judge in your deck, play Judge Palpad, and really punish these stall decks, you can beat them. Decks just aren't, these old deck lists aren't adapting to beat it. And just as for, I gave this a while, he said like, how could people like this format? It's because it's one of the most open formats. Not every format needs to have like S tier gameplay if it's going to be open, and I think Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder still has like A tier gameplay. It's not going 2010 levels of the best experience in Pokemon, but it's going, like, it's still going to have some really engaging games, and you get to play with a lot of different strategies. This format is wide open. Even Zoroark, the deck that was previously just Zoroark or Zoropod, or like straight Zoroark with Magcargo in like the 2018 World format, or Zorogarb, sorry, not Magcargo. Magcargo was afterwards. It's really broken open. We really see this whole new perspective as suddenly these boring archetypes split into like tons of different archetypes because they're not broken anymore. We see all these cool decks pop up, things like White Kyurem. This would never exist in any other format but it exists in this format. It's great. Steelix attacking. I can't believe this is a deck that exists. It does. Lots and lots of cool cards, so I figured it's like worth talking about how this format is just super wide open. Like Passimian is like a super good deck. Like it's a rogue deck, but it's a legitimately great rogue deck. This is one of my favorite decks to see played in this format because it's so exciting and it's legitimately good for a single prize deck. Rayquaza Vikavolt, super simple but super strong. You can get the Meganium decks. I've told you I'm a fan of Meganium. My Greninja Meganium, right? Like, let me see it. There we are. Look at this deck. This is so sick. This is like a thing you can do in Sunlot. No other format, I'm going to say this, no other format are you going to play Super Boost Energy, a card that requires 3 Stage 2 Pokemon in play. If you think this card was seeing a ton of play, like in previous formats, no. If you think it was seeing play anytime after this format, no. But like these decks that are this wide open format with so many cool strategies that allows you to play multiple Stage 2s in the deck. The Swampert engine is a legitimate thing. There's a Stage 2 engine in a modern format deck. A Stage 2 draw engine exists, and it's not just searching you any card like Inteleon. It doesn't even have good evolutions. Its evolutions are terrible.
Because you had cards like Jirachi, you had a strong single prizer with Zapdos. Jirachi really opened the door for a lot of different strategies to unfold. You also had tag team Pokemon, which were kind of interesting at the time because they were designed in a relatively balanced way. I feel like Team Up really just.
This is just a nitpick on specifically tag teams being designed in a balanced way. It's not that the tag teams themselves, Celosaur is more balanced than Pikarom. It's not that Pikarom is at all balanced. Pikarom is one of the most broken cards ever conceived in the game. It's that it had a fighting weakness in a format with a lot of fighting coverage. Pikarom without the fighting weakness, turn that to like any other weakness in the format, and the entire format becomes KO Pikarom, because Pikarom is one of the most absurdly broken cards ever conceived. Even then, like I said, these Stage 2 decks that survived in some lot are not going to be doing good, because Pikarom is going to be full blitzing them turn 1, turn 2 tag bolting them for, 3 prizes on board, if not 4 if you're KOing something like a Lele on the bench with tag bolt. And that's why like these evolution decks just can't succeed in the same way that they did in some lot.
I mean, what strategies existed in Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder that didn't exist in Sun and Moon to Team Up? Yeah, but everybody has their own opinions about decks and formats and formats that they enjoy playing. I enjoy Team Up because I like Jirachi, I like Zapdos, and I liked Pikarom. So it was like cool. The introduction of a lot of these new cards and strategies, I felt like mixed up the formats in a way that was interesting. So I definitely enjoy that. So we've got.
I think that's a good note to end it on. He did make it there, obviously. I'm saying this is my opinion. There are some things that he did get factually wrong, like Decidueye GX being a bad card when it is, in fact, one of the best cards in the format. I do disagree on things like, what strategies, exist in Team Up that didn't in some lot, because obviously you can play these cards, but they're not going to succeed at any level event against bigger, stronger decks like Pikarom and things like Zapdos hitting turn 1. Obviously this is opinion, though I also say fight me, 1v1 me, bro. Let's meet up in Akron, Ohio. I'll drive there. I'll bring all my Sunlot decks, bro, and I'll teach you the magic of Greninja Meganium, one of the most fun decks in the history of the Pokemon TCG. So ultimately, that is just my video. I wanted to clear up misconceptions because it does seem, I've seen it among other people too who played at the time, who just like, shout out to Valk in the Discord I'm in, a very nice person who helps me out with some of my decks sometimes. They played I believe, Blacephalon back then too, and they said they hated the format. Or they either said that they either played Blacephalon or they just played against nothing but Blacephalon and Blacephalon mirrors and things like that. And it's like ultimately, again, the 2010 example. When you go to a format and you play the most boring deck in the format without, room to change, you're going to have less fun than if you go to a format and, play a fun deck. Maybe, you don't have to be like a non-meta deck to be fun. Here is Gardevoir right here. Gardevoir is not a, hugely complex deck. Like, this is Gardevoir, yeah. Jimmy Pendarvis, really good list. I also like this one a bit, too. Gardevoir is not, a rogue deck. It is a meta deck. This is, a tier 1 deck. Really, really, really good deck. Also, Stage 2 Super Boost. Yeah, man, we love Gardevoir. But it actually takes a lot of, there's different routes you can take in different matchups. Alolan Ninetales is a great attacker. Swampert can be used with Super Boost, even hitting for weakness. I have killed several Blacephalons with Swamperts, bro. This card attacks. And that's the thing about this, if you play a bad deck, you're not going to enjoy a format. Let that be the lesson of today. If you enjoy not a bad deck, if you play an unfun deck, you're not going to have fun. Play the cool decks. You don't have to play a meta deck to you don't have to play an unfun deck to succeed. There's plenty of fun decks. This one is great. We saw people achieving success with Decidueye. This deck is still good in this format. If you just want to play straight Decidueye, you could even play like me, and I mean Koffagrigus is definitely going to go 0-3 if you just hit all Zoroarks, but that's a fun deck. BGS, this won a special event. Go ahead and play this. This is a good deck. And it's doesn't have to be meta. This, I would probably stay away from that, to be honest. You don't have to play Blounds. You don't have to play this deck, this 10 card deck where nothing really matters what you play. You can play other decks and have fun, and that's why Sunlot is so great, is because there is so many decks, there's so many creative strategies, there's so many stage 2s. We see viable stage 2s across the board, we see viable stage 1s across the board, obviously the stage 1's most notable, Ninetales and Zoroark, and we see basic decks across the board, things like, Rayquaza, like the Buzzwole decks that can still exist, going for basics like the Malamar spread deck, which is more based on basics, even though it is a stage 1 support deck. Coco Simeon's really good basic deck. And, we just see these crazy Stage 2 decks, too, shout out to Eric Smith for the Sceptile deck, a nice rogue deck from the format. you know, things like Meganium decks, these crazy Stage 2 decks. There's so much variety in this format, and it's why people keep on coming back to this format. Yes, stall is good, that is a problem, and it's one I plan to cover in, you know, the problems of Somewhat video, because people ultimately don't love playing against stall, though it's also, I think, a very good matchup if you are skilled at the format and know how to play the outs. So, yep, like I said, that's the end of it. I just wanted to talk about one of my favorite formats and why I love it, why I think a lot of people have gotten it wrong, because a lot of people, you know, had the Andrew Mahone experience. They played the boring deck, they didn't have fun. You know, man, if you just play Miraidon to every event right now, you're probably not going to have fun either, because the deck's boring. You know, if you go to every single tournament playing the boring deck, you're going to be bored, because boring decks are boring. There's your lesson for the day. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll plan on doing more discussion videos like this in the future, though I don't plan on having a scheduled time for any of these, because ultimately I don't know what I'm doing for Tuesday videos, as I'm working on Roseanne's research videos coming up soon. So thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.